To Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and as a courtesy via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public and board members, the meeting or hearings will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless required by law. This meeting will be recorded by pac-tv. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by viewing the Duxbury Government Access channels, Verizon 39 or Comcast 9. Viewers can visit pac-tv.org/Duxbury for information about Duxbury programming, including streaming and watching replays on Duxbury YouTube. With that, I call the meeting to order, and our first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Next, we have open forum. It's an opportunity for the public to raise any concerns or comments that they would like to be heard at a future agenda. Pursuant to open meeting law, we cannot respond substantively. Board members cannot. We may refer to a town manager to see if he could put something on the agenda, or if any board members have any open agenda items, open forum items that they'd like on agenda, we can do that too. But just say that as a cautionary statement. And if you would like to do something, you can pop up to the podium, give your name and address. I'm going to start with the board members first. I'll start with the Zoomers. Does anybody have anything they'd like to in open forum?
Not me.
Nothing tonight for me, thanks.
All right, great. Amy?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay. I have nothing either. Anybody else from the public?
Sorry. Hey, how's it going? Jeff, hold on. There you go. Jeff Ladd. Is this on? Can you hear me? Bay Road, Duxbury, 470 Bay Road. I just want to take an opportunity to bring up a matter that's come to light over the last week or so here, where we've got a convicted sex offender who was just recently released from jail, currently living at 404 Bay Road. This kind of came up out of the blue, not through official channels per se, as far as communication from the town, but through concerned citizens who've signed up to be notified for these types of events. Word got around pretty quickly, as you can imagine, which has created quite a bit of unrest, not only just in the Bay Road community. I personally live in Mosquito Village, which is just off of Bay Road and Landing Road, Seabury Point, but also beyond that, Alden Heights, Wadsworth, Bay Ridge, Bayview, that whole area, as well as across town. There's a lot of unrest about what's going on. Parents, myself included, we're not prepared for this, and that's not really the subject of what I want to talk about. Preparedness. We're lucky to live in a town where this type of thing doesn't happen very often, but when it does and it sneaks up on you like this, it's pretty unsettling. So I myself, as well as many other parents, are installing cameras. They're restricting their kids' freedoms as far as what they can do unsupervised in our neighborhoods, and as well as having very difficult conversations with kids of an age that probably shouldn't have to hear this type of thing. I think that goes back to what I said about the community that we live in. It's for whatever it's worth, it's a bubble, and we certainly take advantage and appreciate the ignorant bliss that our kids enjoy just being kids at that age. My personal experience is I've got a kid who's having nightmares, who won't sleep by herself now, despite my best efforts to have this conversation in the most appropriate way based on, going on websites and figuring out as a parent how to have that conversation. So I speak for myself, but also for a lot of concerned parents. There's text change, there's Facebook pages, there's Facebook Messenger that go on and on about concerned citizens. And one of the things that's come up is I feel like we need a community forum that's dedicated to this so that we can get some answers from town officials, whether it's the select board, town manager, Duxbury Police Department. And so that's what I would propose here in this particular forum. I know you can't comment on what I'm talking about, but if you can, or if there's anything you can add to it, if there's plans for something like that, certainly appreciate to hear about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go right ahead. And just for anybody, if we heard the topic.
So I'm adding on to what Jeff was
If it's
saying.
something additional,
Yeah,
we'd
it's
be happy
Barbara
to hear.
Cleary, 28 Mullins Ave. I'm probably the oldest member of our group. I've been in the Mosquito Village neighborhood since 1962, when my parents bought Summer Cottage, and I live on Mullins Ave, just down from Jeff and his family. And I agree, it's concerning with all of the parents. My youngest is 13, but I'm worried about all the younger kids that are in the neighborhood. And we understand that the person has done their time and they've served their time, but it's how it snuck up on us, and trying to have these conversations with any age is just very, very difficult. And we appreciate anything that you guys can bring forward, the police can bring forward, to make us feel a little safer in the neighborhood.
All right, thank you. All right. We have a hand up in the Zoom. Ms. Stevens?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name, I cannot do my video because it is not correctly orienting to the screen. Okay. My name is Erin Haggerty Stevens. I live at 5 Eli's Lane in Duxbury. I have 3 young children. I would like to support and reiterate every single thing that Jeff said and every conversation that has come out of that. But one other thing that this other woman was great to speak as well, but I wanted to highlight is I know that, as he said, it was snuck up on us, and I would hate to have a lot of concerned parents draining emergency resources, calling constantly to find out information. So if maybe we could also find out a way to better channel how we are going to handle this in that capacity, because I would hate, I can only imagine that they're getting flooded with calls right now, and finding a better way to more concise and clearly communicate these kind of updates, what to do, setting expectations, things of that nature, to kind of come back from this communication blip would be really great.
All right, thank you. Gentlemen at the podium.
Mark Turner, 63 Puritan Way, Duxbury. Just want to make sure the board and everybody's aware that there are about a dozen folks here. This isn't just a few squeaky voices. This is affecting an entire community. We've had to lock down our children, and we have no way of knowing when or if this is ever going to be let up. This has completely changed all of our lives.
Thank you. Ms. Odd, I see you on the Zoom.
Hi, yes, thank you. I'm Kathleen Ott, 33 Priscilla Avenue. Again, I want to echo everything that everyone else has said. I'm in total agreement of that. And I also want to talk about the laws of the town. And I know that this is a bigger statewide issue, that there's no laws that exist for safe spaces for our children. So this convicted pedophile is sitting at the top of a road to the beach, watching young girls go to and from the beach in their bathing suit. And I just find that so bothersome, that there's no safe spaces for our children to play without the leering eyes of a convicted sex offender. There's no safe spaces, parks, beaches, recreation areas, anything like that. So I know, again, that's a bigger state issue, but I would be interested in the town, the select board, how we can kind of get behind some laws to provide some safe spaces for our children so that they don't have to be scared that they're playing under the leering eyes of a pedophile.
Thank you very much. All right. Go ahead.
I just wanted to thank, I know there's a large contingency here of people here that are expressing their concerns, and I want you to know that we appreciate all of your comments. I was contacted by a number of people last week and this week. I want to let people know and assure them that the Duxbury Police Department is working closely with the individual's parole officer, and we are monitoring the situation. And once a classification has been made, the Duxbury Police Department will take the appropriate steps. If anybody in the audience, either here or on TV, would like to contact the Massachusetts Parole Office Region, it's Region 7, they may be able to possibly answer some of your questions or concerns, and their number is 508-587-0987. Again, the number is 508-587-0987. 587-0987. And we certainly appreciate your concerns as residents. We hear you. We want to make sure that everybody understands that we all want Duxbury to be a safe community for everyone. So, but thank you for taking the time to come here and to contact my office and any of the board members that may have been contacted as well, and the police department.
We can't deliberate about it, but
I can't, but could I ask that maybe you suggest that Chief Carbone maybe put out, I mean, it seems like there's
We will
some
when the
concern
timing is appropriate.
about talking to your kids about this kind of thing, and you know,
Sure.
maybe there's some informational things that he could put on the police website that would be helpful to those kinds of conversations.
Yep, we can do that. Thank you.
I'll take another one. Go ahead.
Lucy Turner, 63 Puritan Way. Absolutely appreciate the conversation that we're having and sharing of that information. However, going back to what Jeff mentioned and what Kathleen referred to, is we are still in a state of unknown. And this individual was paroled on July 10th. And here we are this much longer, and we still don't know what to tell our children. We still don't know how to operate. And so thinking about how we can make this town a safe place, we need to think about how we can make sure that this doesn't happen again. And I hope that we can learn from this as a town and figure out how we can ensure that our children can continue to be safe, because this is not going to be the last time this probably happens. So while I appreciate that you're saying we're working with the information, that still puts us in a standstill as parents. We still have scared children. My son is terrified now. He said, does this bad person now live in our neighborhood? And I had to answer him and say, yes. I didn't want to lie to him. And at 8 years old, to have to go through that is just simply not fair, because the process seems so broken. I'm not blaming that on the town, I'm not blaming it on the police department, but if there is something that we can do as a community to help fix that process so we're not in the same space again, I'd really encourage that we look at that communication chain to allow somebody to be moving into a house with our community unaware of what is going on, and to still be at the space after I've spoken with the parole officer, I've spoken with the chief, I have had all these conversations last week, I still don't have answers. And to me, that's just not acceptable.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, Heather North McGraw. I'm on Bayview Road. I just wanted to add one that I think everybody has covered most of it. I was the person that received the email, and I have spoken to so many people and have yet to have met another person that has received the email. It was called Neighborhood Alerts that my husband had signed up for, and I thought it was spam, so called the police station, got it confirmed. But without that, I don't know if anybody would really even know.
Appreciate it coming tonight. Thank you. If there are no other open meeting items, I will move on to new business. If you would like to stay, you're welcome to, but if you want to take a moment, you're here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And Kathleen Ott, I used to live in your house at 33 Priscilla Ave. It's my
Oh, wow.
my old address.
We'll have to chat about that. You're welcome
I
to
know,
stop by
I'd
anytime if you
I'd
want to
walk
see.
by often.
Oh, yes, okay, yeah, come on, stop in.
All right. All right. So the first item on the agenda is a discussion regarding 370 Summer Street, the Di Lorenzo Conservation Restriction number 47. It should be presented by Nancy Rufo, unless
We're going to postpone this to a later meeting.
we are going to postpone this to a later meeting. Is that all right?
Mr. Chair, before we decide
Sure.
to do that, I am going to miss the next couple of meetings. I'm a little bit concerned and not understanding why this is being postponed. These conservation restrictions are very boilerplate. The language is, dictated by the state. And it appears that we've entered into some kind of negotiations that I think are a slippery slope. I think, again, town meeting voted in this parcel. They purchased this parcel with the intention, with the caveat that this be a conservation restriction be placed on this property. And I'm kind of concerned that we're keep kicking this down the road. I'm not clear
Okay.
why we're doing that.
May I ask somebody to elaborate on why we're being asked to postpone this?
Hi, Nancy Rufo, Conservation Administrator. So Amy is correct. Conservation restrictions are required by law on properties that were purchased using CPA funds. And the 27 plus Del Lorenzo Farm falls under that category. Typically, they're very boilerplate. There's a state template that we use. We will edit it based on the property specifics. But we've never entered into any type of review with a farmer or a grower that is leasing the property. What we typically do is we have the boilerplate restriction, which then we'll follow up with a management lease with, in this case, we have a farmer on Del Lorenzo. We have multiple similar properties, cranberry bogs, where we have leases with the cranberry growers. The growers have never, that I know of, looked at, commented on. They did not have input on the conservation restriction.
If I could just what's the, just to focus on the one issue of why are we postponing it tonight?
A select board member raised some questions last week about whether activities at the farm could continue as they have been. I thought I had answered them, which was why it was added to tonight again.
Yeah.
But then I received an email from the farmer with similar questions again. We did have our weekly Del Lorenzo meeting. Every Monday we connect, and once a month we try to do it on site. So we were, a group of us were on site this morning, and I did talk to the farmer, and I did offer to have a meeting kind of offline with him and his wife, and Pat Loring, who's definitely the CR guru, and myself, and the select board member who raised the original questions. I kind of feel obligated to do that at this point. Otherwise, I don't know if they might have come tonight.
When do you anticipate that would take place?
I actually haven't put out that request. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks. I don't know about availability.
Okay.
Again, Mr. Chair, I'm concerned to just say it, the people who lease the town properties don't get a seat at the table when it comes to conservation restrictions. They just don't. It's historically not done. Again, it's boilerplate language that the state dictates. We adopt it. Town meeting voted in the conservation restriction, and I'm just confused as to what, it appears that we are starting a process that I believe could be a very slippery slope moving forward for these types of acquisitions and for our town-owned conservation land.
Right. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
Oh,
if-
sorry, we're just real quick,
Yeah,
Brian,
if I-
sorry.
Just to,
Just
and I apologize, I was, I was knocked off the Zoom here. I didn't hear everything that Nancy said, but I'm the select board member who asked the questions. I have a point of order, and then I have some comments. A point of order is that my understanding is this wasn't going to be taken up tonight. So I don't believe, I can't see the crowd, but I don't believe the farmer is there. Otherwise, I think the farmer and a number of other people would be in attendance. They were instructed or advised that this wouldn't be taken up. So I don't want to shortchange the folks who are directly affected by this. So I'd ask that we not move this forward. It sounds like we're getting into substantive discussions. The second piece of the comment is simply that, and to Amy's point, I understand this isn't a negotiation on a conservation restriction. This is simply making sure that what the Conservation Commission and the farmer agreed to do in terms of the rehabilitation of this town-owned resource can happen based upon the terms of the conservation restriction. My understanding is there are some wrinkles that may provide or may pose some speed bumps in terms of allowing the farmer to rehabilitate the farm pursuant to the terms of the license. So it's really an administrative issue, and nobody's challenging the validity or necessity of a conservation restriction. It's simply making sure that the conservation restriction and the separate license agreement that was entered into between the farmer and the town are aligned. That's all this is about. And the farmer, who's put a lot of time and effort and resources into rehabilitating the farm so far, has raised some issues, has indicated he's more than willing to sit with Nancy and work through the terms to make sure that any issue can be smoothed out. So when we say we're continuing this, it's simply to make sure that we're not signing something today that's going to preempt, prohibit, or otherwise interfere with what the town and the farmer have already agreed is going to be the plan going forward. It's as simple as that.
So I can speak to that. It will not. So the conservation restriction, the conservation restrictions in Massachusetts are a little confusing. It's a template. When you read it, Section 1 or Section 2 says, here's a huge list of all of these things you are prohibited from doing. And then Section 3 says, oh, but if the grantor, which is us, allows these things, here's a longer list of things that you can do. And essentially, so that CR document is in perpetuity, which is why we don't solicit input typically, because the person that's there right now most likely won't be there in perpetuity. So that's why we have these secondary license agreements, which the farmer could have input on, signed by the farmer and the town. And nothing will change if once this CR is signed, nothing is going to change. Our guiding document with the Del Lorenzo Farm is that license agreement, which specifies more specifically to what they're trying to accomplish there, what can and can't be done. But I'm more than happy to meet and make sure everybody's comfortable. And it is a very complicated process and document, but I'm fine with postponing it.
So I'll start with the point of order here. We have 4 board members here. We don't have an odd number. What's the pleasure of the board? And I'm happy to take a vote if we don't have a unanimous consensus here.
Since I raised the question and tried to move it forward, I mean, if Nancy has agreed and people want to talk about it, again, it's a little confusing to me why we're doing that, Brian. Yes, you added some clarity, and I thank you for that. I do think that these are very boilerplate language, and again, town meeting, there was a lot of discussion on this parcel and what was going to be done, but it was agreed to put the conservation restriction, have the parcel farmed and with the lease with the town. And, I just want to make sure that we aren't opening up a process for the future that, is more complicated or more divisive than it needs to be in any respect. So I'm fine with postponing if everybody wants to do that and give this some more time, but I'm also fine with moving forward with it, so.
What's the Cindy, do you have an opinion on this?
Yeah, excuse me, I think that where Nancy has suggested to the farmer that she'll meet with them, I think we can follow through on that and bring it back in hopefully our next meeting, or shortly.
And I know your position, Brian. Well, I think that makes sense here. You did say you had a scheduling conflict.
I'm not, yeah, I've got a wedding.
Could we potentially communicate with Amy if there's any concerns? I mean, I don't want to leave,
There's honestly no rush to sign it.
Okay.
So we can put it off for a month even, to work on everybody's schedule.
And that's not an issue. All right.
Yeah, no, the timing isn't an issue.
Where?
And I don't necessarily, I really think that this is so standard. Town meeting voted to put the conservation restriction on, so I think we'd be hard pressed to not do it. So I think you got, why don't you have your meeting and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll postpone it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Did you want
Yes, I do. I do want to say something. Thank you. I'm here representing the farmer, and I am his business partner. The language is contradictory, and I don't know how many conservation restrictions involve agricultural property, which is why we're asking for an opportunity. We just got to see the conservation restriction, which we believe and we know is necessary, mandatory. And we just want to make sure that it's not going to prohibit us from moving forward. And we've already done a lot of things that are in the prohibitions section of the conservation restriction, and we have concerns. So,
Well, we did hear that Nancy's going to meet with you, so, and I just did postpone this, so
yeah,
I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right. It is not, is it? Oh, it is. We have gone past 6:45. Would you mind stepping up and being a clerk tonight, since?
Yes, I will
do we have
move to adjourn as the Select Board and convene as Water and Sewer Commissioners.
Second? I don't know if yeah. Second?
Second.
Second from Brian. All those in favor, roll call vote.
Amy, aye.
Brian, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Michael, aye. All right. What do we have here? I have to find it.
We have Mark. Mark's going to lead the discussion, right?
Okay. great.
Actually, I am.
Oh, you are.
All right. Look at this.
But I do have Mark. You don't mind, do you?
Welcome to the Water Commissioners meeting, sir.
I'm going to start by reading the memo. So in your packets, you'll see a memo from me dated July 19th regarding the proposed underground irrigation regulation. Dear members, after the, over the past few weeks, I have been working with Water and Sewer Superintendent Mark Cloud, DPW Director Sheila Scarzi, and Town Council on a proposed underground irrigation regulation, which you will find attached here too. The need for this proposed regulation is twofold, primarily compliance and secondarily capacity. The compliance aspect stems from the town's need to meet the requirements of our Water Management Act permit issued through Mass DEP and establishes the average daily household water usage amount of 65 gallons per person, also called the residential gallons per capita per day, or RGPCD. As you will see in the chart below, for the past several years, the town of Duxbury has been using an average of 79 gallons per person per day. The secondary reason, capacity, is compounded when coupled with regularly exceeding daily water usage limits, particularly on hotter days, and our wells are running 16 to 22 hours a day. These higher needs for water stress the system and in some cases can cause the volume of water in our tanks to lower significantly. Further, mandating water tank storage levels is critical for both the distribution system pressures and fire flow volumes. If the water levels in the storage tanks drop below minimum system thresholds, the usable fire flow storage volume is lost, resulting in the inability to maintain service pressures while fighting fires. During periods of sustained excessive water demands, this translates to the inability to adequately fight fires. Say that one fast. Mass DEP will consider public water supply permittees who cannot meet the 65-gallon performance standard to be functionally equivalent and in compliance with their permit if they have an ongoing program in place that ensures best practices for controlling residential water use. The proposed regulation is one of the best practices that will allow functional equivalence and help the town to stay in compliance with our permit. The result of my discussions with town council were as follows. Jeff Blake sent me this email that said, "You have requested an opinion regarding whether the town can impose fines pursuant to a town policy or if a bylaw is required to impose fines. In my opinion, a policy can reference penalties, but the mechanism for imposing the actual penalty must be found in the town's bylaws or regulations. Under Mass General Law, municipalities can affix penalties for breaches of bylaws as long as the penalties do not exceed $300 per offense. Additionally, under Section 21D, the town may establish a bylaw to provide for non-criminal disposition of violations of any ordinance or bylaw or any rule or regulation of any municipal officer, board, or department, the violation of which is subject to a specific penalty. The town has adopted a non-criminal disposition bylaw, Chapter 1, 1.14. Thus, in my opinion, to impose a penalty according to a town policy, there needs to be a bylaw or regulations that specifies the violation, the enforcing authority, and the applicable penalty. Further, in my opinion, the term penalty should be used rather than fine, which carries with it criminal connotations. As to the proposed underground irrigation policy, in my opinion, incremental penalties could be referenced in the policy, but the violation would need to be enumerated either in the regulations or a bylaw, as pointed out in the comment section 1 of violations, enforcement, and penalties. Under Chapter 10.2, Water Supply of the town's bylaws, the Department of Public Works has the authority to impose penalties for violations of any water restrictions set during a water supply emergency. In my opinion, the town could establish a similar bylaw setting the scope of use for municipal water connections and penalties for violations thereof. Alternatively, in my opinion, the Water Commissioners Select Board can promulgate regulations addressing the issue. Under general law, Chapter 41, Section 69B, the Water Commissioners or Select Board shall have exclusive charge and control of the water department and water system, subject to all lawful bylaws and to such instructions, rules, and regulations as the town may from time to time impose its vote. Either option, bylaw or regulation, would provide a mechanism for imposing incremental penalties for violations. As Council has noted, town meeting approval is required for the adoption of a bylaw, while only a vote of the board, acting as the Water Commissioners, is required to adopt a regulation. To allow the board greater flexibility in the future, largely for amendment purposes, and the ability to make changes more quickly, I recommend that the board adopt this proposal as a regulation, which is how it has been drafted, and not as a bylaw. Finally, although this proposed underground irrigation regulation is ready for adoption now, if the board wishes to do so, we clearly understand that this will be your first time reviewing it, and that of the Water and Sewer Advisory Board. As such, it can be adopted at a later date if the board so chooses. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know. So this was floated out there to not just this board, but to members of the Water and Sewer Advisory Board, because I kind of wanted to make sure that everybody had a fair chance to see it all at the same time. Again, you could adopt it tonight, but that's entirely up to you. But I think you probably want to send it over to Water and Sewer Advisory. It's up to you. We're here to field any questions, too.
I think the one question I have for you, and I still have kind of based on this language, is could you explain the grandfathering aspect of this policy?
In fact, let's take a quick look at that. So the purpose is, well, short of reading it all, I'll read over the highlights. The purpose: the Duxbury Select Board, acting as the town of Duxbury Water Commissioners, understands the importance of maintaining the public water supply for the town of Duxbury, while maximizing the conservation of our water resources, providing quality water to our customers and dependable fire flow to our residents. Therefore, the Select Board has established this regulation pertaining to new irrigation systems. That's key, new irrigation systems. So the applicability: this regulation shall apply to all property owners prospectively utilizing new irrigation systems in the town of Duxbury at the time of adoption. Property owners utilizing an existing irrigation system connected to the town of Duxbury's water distribution system at the time of adoption shall be grandfathered and may continue to utilize their connection to the system. However, pre-existing systems shall not increase the number of sprinklers or the coverage area of a system. Should a pre-existing system be increased, penalties will be imposed as set forth herein until such time that the system is returned to the original configuration. So, under implementation.
Can I just stop you there?
Yeah, please.
That was the one piece I'm trying to understand here. So this would apply to people that put in new irrigation systems and try to hook them up to their
Yes.
to the town water. It would not apply to people that want to keep their old one. Would it apply to someone that inherits an old one? So a new home buyer comes in, irrigation set up to the
No, it's
water.
it's intended to
Only new systems that go
new
in.
systems or expanded existing.
Got it.
Expanded existing. Okay,
Correct.
so here's, and this is really my situation. So we've put in an irrigation system and have never turned it on because I'm too thrifty and Jamie wanted to put it in when we put it in. So it's never been turned on. So, I mean, what's the answer there? Am I grandfathered,
Yeah, because you have an existing system.
even though it's never been turned on?
You pull the permit, that's the new. So you come in, do the work, and that's it.
It's enforcement is going to be the biggest,
Absolutely.
it's going to rely on neighbors, saying.
That is the
ratting
trick
out
with water
neighbors,
usage
I don't like
enforcement.
that,
It's
but-
tough. It's
Yeah,
tough to
very
do.
tough.
But it isn't necessarily about the enforcement on the existing systems. What it's more geared toward, the intent is, hooking up new systems to our existing water system. We don't want to continue to pipe the water out. If people need to put in a well under these regulations.
Right.
You want irrigation, put in a well, and you're on your own.
And I think it really will,
Because we don't want to put additional load on the system.
it will, I think, mostly affect people who are, building new construction. And
Absolutely.
I've been saying this for years, and I'll say it again, but when it comes to Chapter 40B developments, which are huge impacts in town, the zoning board has had and continues to have the ability to regulate that, because that provision isn't going to make that project uneconomic to require them to build a well or to not have huge lawn size. So again, when it comes to 40Bs, we really already have the ability to limit or require them to do a well, so we should be doing that.
Before we jump to community, does any other board members have anything? I see Brian's got his hand up. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mike. And you touched upon one of the questions that I have about the grandfathering. So, for example, in Section 3, we say that if you're grandfathered, that's fine, but if you do have an existing well, you're required now to connect to your private well, which of course does not leave the status quo. It requires the homeowner to undertake whatever the cost is to hook up to that private well. So I'm a little concerned that we say it's grandfathering, but I'm not sure it is in all respects. And related to that is the provision about low flow heads, rain sensors, and setting irrigation levels. I suppose that's all fine. I just don't know. And if folks have systems that don't have low flow, whatever we're saying those mean, does that require owners of existing systems to now undertake the cost of replacing all the heads with low flow heads? So I guess I'm trying to make sense of the grandfathering aspect while looking at these requirements, saying, yeah, you might be grandfathered, but these are the things you need to do to be in compliance. So I think we may need some more input or some more work on this. A related question is, how do we arrive at the irrigation system's limit of 1/2 inch per week? I'm not sure I have an appreciation for what that means in terms of being able to maintain a healthy lawn or not. So I'd want some more input to make sure that the maximums we're imposing here are appropriate to allow for existing systems and new systems, for that matter, to achieve their purpose of a lawn.
With regard to number 3, that's to be determined. That's for the board to figure out with the Water and Sewer Advisory Board. And with number 4, I believe those are the industry standards. Again, I'm sure the Water and
Between
Sewer...
now and then.
Yeah, I'm sure the Water and Sewer Advisory Board would probably want to weigh in on that. Is that correct, Mark, that those are the Mark, are those the industry standards for Section 4?
I'm not quite sure as far as the installers.
Okay, we can find out.
Okay.
Can Mark speak into the mic? I can't.
Yeah.
He wasn't sure, was his answer.
His answer was he didn't know. Yeah.
Thanks.
He's approaching.
Mark Cloud, Water and Sewer Superintendent. I'm not sure if those are standards for irrigation companies.
Okay. Cindy?
Yeah, besides the requiring people who presently have wells to hook up to presently have, irrigation to hook up to a well, there's also implementation, as Brian said, for things like low flow heads and whatnot. But I don't see, we can say that, but how, there's no really enforcement. Is there any way of inspecting them or giving people, a year, 2 years to make those changes and then inspecting them? And it doesn't say, it's sort of more like a suggestion that people want to do it, to me, because I don't see any way of enforcing that. unless we put some enforcement in there, some sort of inspection, which I'm sure the water department or whomever does not have time to do.
Amy?
It does say that they shall do that, and I just wanted to pick up on something that you said, Cindy, was that that the people with existing irrigation systems would need to hook up to a well, but they don't. They'd be grandfathered in, and so I guess that it's the carrot. The carrot is that you get to stay on town water and continue to use town water, but you need to take these measures. And I am with Brian. I don't know whether that's, standard practice or what, whether that is enough or, where those numbers came from, but we certainly can learn about that. But I think the goal here is to try to encourage people to water less and be more frugal and more environmentally responsible. If you're using the town water, this is what you need to do that. If you don't want to measure and take these steps, then your option is to dig a well and pump it out yourself. So, I think as a general thing, I think that this is a step in the right direction. I think we're there. I think we need to do this. But I agree that maybe definitely I'd like to hear from our water and sewer commissioners on this and let, other people weigh in.
Okay. We are going to put this off to another night, but if I know you showed up, so I'm going to let you speak.
Priscilla Chandler, Lincoln Street, Agricultural Commission member. I apologize for coming in late and then asking the question, but is agricultural use addressed in this?
No, they're exempt.
Is it exempt?
It's exempt, yeah. This is for residential applications.
Great. How can we, when does the water commissioners meeting, the water supervisor?
I don't know, but I sent it to Tanya, and she's going to bring it to them.
Okay.
It's August 12th.
Okay.
It's August 12th, just like Mark said.
And if anybody else maybe has some questions or concerns or edits, proposed edits, maybe send them directly to Rainey.
Yeah, that's fine. This was simply a starting point, so.
Is there somebody somebody within town hall or somebody we can reach out to that knows some of the questions, for instance, about the, half of
Absolutely.
inch a week, what
Yep.
is that? Yeah.
Yep, we can chase that down, no problem.
Okay. All right. We do have a heavy agenda here, so I think we can move on, pick this up another night. Do we have anything else while we're water and sewer commissioners from anybody on the board? There being a pause.
Nope.
I am going to ask that we close this.
I move that the water and sewer commissioners adjourn their meeting and reconvene as the select board.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor by roll call vote, please.
Amy, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye. All right, I think we're out. Now, we have a discussion regarding the change of hours for Snug Harbor Wine.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself on this as there maybe I'm a little confused on whether that I have a work relationship there.
Okay, great. Mr. Richard Marble, the owner of Snugger Harbor Wine, would like to amend his hours as follows. Summer hours through April 1st through August 31st. Monday, they'll be closed. Tuesday and Wednesday, or actually, so these are the amended hours. Monday closed, Tuesday, Wednesday, 2 to 7. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 11 to 7. Sunday, 12 noon to 5 p.m. And the fall and winter hours, that will be September 1st to March 31st. Monday and Tuesday closed. Wednesday, 2 to 7. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, 11 to 7. And Sunday, noon to 5. So and I don't know, maybe Nancy knows offhand, what are they currently? And if you.
Mr. Chair, for the summer hours, there's a typo, Sunday is 12 to 7.
12 to 7, okay. So is it the addition of adding to 7 p.m.? Is that what he's amending his hours?
They're reducing, he's running it by himself. It used to be open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m., Saturday to 11. So he's just cutting hours.
Okay, so just for the board members that are on there, Nancy stated that he's cutting the hours a little bit, or amending them. Does anybody have any questions? Do we have any, does Mr. Marble here or anybody else from Snug Harbor one that would like to weigh in on this? Go ahead, Cindy.
Quick question. On the license,
Yes.
it looks like that we would be signing, it looks like the Sunday hours are 12 to 7.
Yes, that was
Is that
another
because
thing
that's
that.
what's allowed?
Yes, that was, I'm sorry, Cindy. When Nancy spoke, she was at the desk. She did say that that was a typo. It was supposed to be 12 to 7, as it says on the license. It was a typo what I was reading.
Oh, 12 to 5 is the typo?
Yes, so it's supposed to be 12 to 7.
Okay, all right. And
But good catch.
the previous, I see it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, and you said, and so, okay, nobody else is here. I will take a motion. Amy, do you mind reading the motion? Even though you're recusing
I move
yourself?
that the Select Board, as the local licensing authority, approve of the revised hours of operation for Snug Harbor Wine LLC, doing business as Snug Harbor Wine, license number 00043-PK-0300, Richard W. Marble II, manager, and located at 459 Washington Street, as presented.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call vote, please.
Cindy, aye.
Right, aye.
Michael, aye.
Amy recuse.
All right. The next item on the agenda, we are having a joint meeting with between the Planning Board, the MBTA Communities Working Group, and our Select Board regarding
MBTA
the
communities.
MBTA Communities Working Group.
They're not all here yet. Do you mind?
Yeah, so
Do you mind
maybe
doing
we'll,
my report?
why don't we have the town manager give his report? I know the Planning Board is only partially here.
They have a meeting.
They have a meeting and don't have a quorum here. So we're going to move on to the town manager's report. Go right ahead, sir.
Awesome, thank you. A couple of quick updates for you. The weekly nesting report for the Duxbury portion, the Duxbury seawall area portion from CZM. I received notice from Jay with Mass Audubon regarding the piping plovers at or near the seawall portion of the Duxbury Beach, again near the seawall. Jay has stated that due to the piping plover season getting close to wrapping up and no signs of nesting at the CZM portion of Duxbury Beach, we will no longer be sending weekly updates. They will send us a season summary report of the site in the future and once they've gone through all of their data. With regard to the Duxbury seawall, last week I received notice from Roberta Budnick with the Regulatory Division of the New England District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, verifying that the town of Duxbury's proposed seawall and revetment repair project and sand dune restoration project meet the terms and conditions of Mass Regional General Permits 7 and 9. What does all that mean? This means the seawall project may now move forward. Our engineer, Pat Brennan, was filing the prevailing wage rate request today, and the publication date in the Central Register for the bid documents will be July 31st. The solicitations for bids will run for 3 weeks, and the bids will be due the week of August 21st. Bidders will have 14 days to return the bid documents, such as the contracts, etc., to the town after the town issues the notice of award, which could mean that the estimated construction would begin in mid-September. The goal is to have the contractor do as much work as they can this year, and they will start the project at Ocean Road South and work their way north because of the various time-of-year restrictions. The contractor will have until October of 2025 to finish, thus only one bid is needed if 2 phases of the construction are required. The contractors will all understand that they can make more money the quicker they go. So I'm very pleased with that. This is great and long overdue news for the residents along the seawall and for the town, and I want to express my sincerest thanks to Pat for helping us get to this point. Also, with regard to the CZM grant update on the seawall note again, I also want to take a moment to again thank Candace Martin for submitting the CZM Coastal Resiliency Grant application related to the seawall on behalf of the town of Duxbury last week. That, too, is an important project, and we are hopeful that her efforts will be met with success. Her work and continued assistance in this effort are greatly appreciated. Finally, Duxbury Beach update. Currently, we have 50 piping plover pairs with 0 active nests and 6 broods of chicks at Duxbury Beach. To date, 14 broods have fledged thus far, for a total of 33 chicks that fledged. To date, 23 nests have been lost, 18 of those due to predators, 23 broods have been lost, 12 have been lost to suspected predation. Please note that crossover 1 and 2 have limited openings, and it is not possible to travel between the 2 crossovers or drive to crossover 3 on the beach. There are active leased tern nests and chicks, and there is no driving through these areas. Noncompliance may result in sticker revocation. At crossover 2, a drive-through corridor is established north of the crossover, and there is no parking until exiting the drive-through corridor. Please check with rangers for the most up-to-date information regarding access areas open and closed to OSVs, as these are still subject to daily changes. I mention this because this past weekend, driving through the closed area became necessary because of a vehicle stuck in crossover 2. We do want to make sure that the users understand that this is not the case under normal circumstances. Driving is only allowed in designated open areas, and that driving in closed areas is not allowed, as it puts our permit for OSV driving at risk. Leased terns, more fledged leased tern chicks were observed in the last week, but there are still a number of leased tern chicks on the ground, with some only being a few days old. A number of nests are still in the incubation stage and may hatch in the coming weeks. And that is it with regard to the beach. And then finally, with regard to the Sustainable Budget Task Force, last month, Mary McKinnon made a presentation to the board on behalf of the Sustainable Budget Task Force. At that time, she asked that if any member had additional comments to please contact her. To date, she hasn't heard from anyone, but she wanted to ask that if you would like to follow up with her, kindly do so at your earliest convenience. There's my update. Thank you.
Now that we have the grants for the seawall project and.
Well, we submitted one.
2.
Good,
Okay,
too, sorry.
but we have the permits.
Yes.
Right, the permits are in place.
Uh-huh.
We should now be able to, Fernando suggested last week that he likes those Gantt charts or whatever, the trajectory of each of the projects, the DPW along with the seawall project, specifically the breach nourishment part of that project. Can I ask that you kind of try to figure that out and see if the trajectory may, in fact, be possible so that we could
Yes.
utilize the sand from the DPW site at the seawall, saving the taxpayers money? Thank you.
Uh-huh, no problem.
I do want to say, wasn't in the update, I'm thrilled that the Oversand driving was open this weekend.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even mention that.
We had hundreds of spots out there.
Yeah.
It was an excellent weekend. Everyone was happy. It's the way it should be. And I am grateful to DBR, Save Duxbury Beach, our excellent crew out in the rec department there, Rainey, and all of our board members. We have had many conversations here, forums. It's working. You know, to have this, we're getting some balance back here. So I appreciate you enduring a lot of my conversations that sometimes can become long-winded and difficult, because this is working. And people and families were very happy this weekend, so.
And I think it was 3 weeks prior to where we were last year, right?
Yeah, now, is that attributed to the pallets that they put out? What's the magic bullet here? What,
I don't think
do
there's
we have one?
one
Based on the
bullet.
based on the stats, I don't know if it's any one single thing. I think the pallets probably helped. I think predation is another factor.
And also some of the work with the, what DBR's asked for in their permit, reducing setbacks and things like that, working with the state. Ideas from everyone, input from everyone. I think all of those things.
So when you just said predation, you mean because the nests are getting eaten, you know, some things are.
Yeah, the numbers were really high.
Didn't we learn, though, that if a predator gets the chicks or the eggs, then they re-nest, delaying the process even longer? But that doesn't seem like it's happening this year. It seems like those nests that were taken by predators didn't
didn't
re-nest.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they might be taking the parents too. I don't
Oh,
know.
geez.
I don't know.
All right, well,
But yeah, they
okay.
lost
I
23
asked.
nests. Yeah, they lost 23 nests, 18 of which were due to predators. And 23 broods were lost, 12 because of suspected predation, so that's pretty
Yeah,
high.
so those numbers were up there. It's just curious how it's all coming together, but I'm glad that, you know.
I think it's a number of factors, but I think that's
think it's-
certainly significant.
It's good that
Yes.
people are happy.
Yeah. All right. Do we still don't have a planning board here.
Not yet, you can do committee stuff.
We
Okay.
have some
Let's
liquor
Let's go through
licenses.
let's go through everything else. Committee appointments and liquor licenses. Would you mind reading the,
I'll get there.
All
All
right.
right, let me do the committees first. I move that the Select Board appoint or reappoint the following for a term to expire on 6/30/25 to the Age and Dementia Friendly Task Force. Appoint Mike Herlihy, Frank Holden, and Tony Kelso.
may I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Oh, roll call, I'm sorry, we have two
Oh,
remote.
sorry.
Could we do
Amy.
that again? Roll call.
Amy, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye.
The following boards and committees have available seats. The Alternative Energy Committee has 2 seats, Coastal Resiliency, 2 seats. Duxbury Cultural Council has 1 seat, as does the Economic Advisory Committee, the Finance Committee, the Fiscal Advisory Committee, and the Historical Commission, as well as the Nuclear Advisory Committee. The King Caesar Advisory Committee has 2 seats. If anyone is interested in volunteering on a board or committee, you are encouraged to fill out a talent bank form, which can be found on the town's website under the Forms and Documents tab.
All right, thank you. We now have a one-day liquor license request from the Alden Kindred, who are seeking a one-day license on Friday, August 2nd, 2024, from 6 to 9 for the Alden Kindred reunion. Does any board members have any questions about this or comments? All right, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, thanks. It's more of an observation. So in our packet, I saw that the police department had a concern about the lack of food being served. And I just want to point out that the applicant responded to that concern, and I understand, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I understand the police department is now satisfied with so otherwise everything is in order.
Well, not only are the police department satisfied, but the Alden Kindred people who are going there will be more satisfied with some food.
Yeah, store-bought apps, cheese and crackers. All right, ready for a motion.
I move that Ms. Desiree Mobed, as a representative of the Alden Kindred of America Incorporation, is granted a one-day wine and malt license for their Alden Kindred reunion on Friday, August 2nd, 2024, from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Alden House Historic Site, 105 Alden Street, Duxbury, contingent upon the conditions of the license.
All right, keep the,
Second.
second.
Amy, aye. Oh, sorry. Oh, you have
Aye.
to call for it.
All those in favor, and a roll call vote, please.
Amy, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye. All right, we have some announcements. One.
That the next scheduled Select Boards meeting will be on Monday, August 5th, 2024, at 6:30.
All right. We have a bonus shellfish season.
I move that the Select Board declare a temporary bonus shellfish season for the commercial harvesting of soft-shell clams for the month of August and the commercial harvesting of quahog clams for the month of August.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Amy, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye. All right.
Could we maybe walk down and get the planning board? Are
did
they
see
down the
someone
hall
step
or?
out.
No.
Senior Center.
Oh,
I texted Paul,
And what time are they on for?
7:30.
okay. It's 7:30. It's getting a little muggy in here. Would it be all right with the board if we take a 5-minute break? Come back at like 7:40? A little bit before?
Just
Is
fine
everybody
with
good with
me.
that? We'll
Yep.
get everybody over here?
We're just sitting here looking at each other, so we're done with our business.
Great.
Oh, wait.
The exterior doors are locked.
Oh, that's not good for an open meeting.
We'll come back 2 minutes here.
The back door was locked?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Pardon?
I had an email from someone, James, that the meeting.
We wouldn't intentionally do that.
No, no. Actually, Nancy's very good about making sure they are open.
How are you?
Yeah, here's the place, second row, and when I get back.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I have the presentation on the select.
Yeah.
I'm a consultant. Yeah.
Sit up here?
On the screen?
Okay.
Did you send it to Nancy?
Well, Emily, I'm assuming, right?
You'll have to ask Nancy as soon as she gets back
Okay, so
down.
that's what it is.
Yep. That's Nancy.
I went over there, I just saw that.
Yep.
Both the doors are locked.
Yeah, we weren't sure why.
Little red lights on and everything.
We'll find out.
I stuck the block in front of the back door.
Are you waving to me?
No.
Oh.
He's trying to get us on camera for a while, I guess. I don't know.
Waiting for Nancy.
Jack didn't find it. Yeah, tremendous. It's good. I know, You guys can go for a recess, right? You know. It's still going.
We should have, but we're still going.
All right, Nancy's back. All right, everyone. Cindy?
Yeah.
All right. We
I'm
can,
taking my 2-minute break.
I know.
It was a quick 2 minutes.
We have a presentation tonight by Steve Kearney of Stantec and Paul Alkiotis, our interim planning director. This is a joint meeting with the planning board and the MBTA Communities Working Group. I just asked those two groups if they would open their meetings, please.
We no longer have a quorum.
Okay, so that's one down. MBTA Communities, do you have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
All right, you just open your meeting.
Okay. I'll move that the working group open this meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I can't.
I understand. So for the attendees, we have one of our members who is online, so we'll have to do a roll. So can we get a vote by roll? Tag.
Thank Carpenter, aye.
Very good. Phil.
Bill Thorne, aye.
Allison.
Allison Shane, aye.
Very good. And Carl, are you online?
Carl, aye.
Thank you. And Steve Gant, aye.
Thank you very much. All right, now I will take the presentations. We have, it looks like Steve's up first here. If you could introduce yourself and you may proceed.
Steve Carney, Stantec Consulting Services, here to give hopefully a very brief presentation, so ignore how many slides there actually are. It'll
Thank
be
you,
a
sir.
speed version. And Nancy, do I speak to you to hit next?
Yes.
This is a presentation that's been expanding as we've been meeting with the committee. Paul thought it would be helpful for us just to walk through how, these scenarios have been evolving. But just real quickly, an introduction to the approach. I think we can jump over the glossary, but we want to include this information for, if this is a public document, for others to see. An introduction to the original sites and then where we ended up, and then the introduction to the scenarios, and then really the last 3 slides of this presentation tonight are what I think we want to discuss this evening. So I want to get there as fast as possible. So next slide. One just thing that's important is the fact that if we're looking at the Island Creek site, which is one of the 3 original proposed that we responded to, it exceeds the 50% threshold, so we're good. So if that site's included, it's one of the criteria that one area has to be more than 50% of the total contiguous area. And so that just sort of sets Duxbury up in a way that it's easier to configure this. And again, we're looking at complying with MBTA. Next slide. We did 2 pieces here. Scenario A, think A for ambitious. That one really is kind of looking to comply to see what Duxbury can do, how many units we can really get into some of these areas. We have, at this very same time, understood very much the concerns over MBTA communities, and we've also understand very much the timeline, which is tight to say the least. And so scenario B, sort of more the bare minimum, how do we get to compliance, doing, still complying with MBTA, but just getting right where we need to go. Next slide. These are all of the glossary. I won't read through all of these, but we have them in here. There's just the areas, the sub-districts, all of those pieces. We may need to come back to that, but I can probably clarify if there's any questions. Next slide. So these were the original sites that we began to look at. In the RFP, it was Island Creek, Summer Congress, and Temple Street. We're highlighting Bonji's because I think even on the next slide, once we get to it, the other ones were, I'm sorry, you can go back. There were some other ones in case these sites didn't work out in the beginning. Those are the ones in yellow that we would be looking at as well. But we really ultimately began looking, Temple Street, according to a former planner, Chris Ryan, was likely going to be a more contentious area. And Bonji's came up, you'll see it on a slide coming up, as an already identified by previous planning as a potential location. So we did bring in Bonji's to look at. And now you'll kind of see these areas. Next slide, sorry. So again, Island Creek, the thatched area around, that's wetland. In the beginning, we kept that in. It helped minimally, but you can't really develop it. But we included that as it was part of it. And you can see this is really looking primarily at the Island Creek area. So next slide. Again, wetlands. So there's going to be a lot of little pieces in here that we added to really let this be a standalone presentation. Go again. Next slide. And then Summer Congress Street up on the Pembroke Line 53. Next. Temple Street, as I mentioned, just west of Route 3. Next slide. And then Bonji's, and this is what I mentioned from the Duxbury Land Inventory and Assessment, was the other one that we took a serious look at. Because of the concern over Temple Street, we didn't really get into the details of that, so you won't see Temple Street. We're looking at the Congress, basically Congress, Bonji's, and the Island Creek site. And then we started looking into the scenarios of how one might do this. And I think the next slide should be the scenarios, the new alternative. Again, we're looking at sort of the different opportunities and how we might do this one in terms of the lower density, in different areas. But you get forced into what we need to do, as you'll see in the scenario. So keep going. And we had a conversation in the beginning about maybe we would want to look at, obviously, with Bonji's and the small, those 2.35 acre ones already commercial, that there could be the mixed use opportunity here. But this is going to evolve, so keep going. And this is just the introduction to scenarios, not a very good resolution, but we don't need this one, so next slide. Okay, so scenario 1, this is taking those 3 areas that we looked at. This is sort of, looking at a higher one, but still, 15 units per acre, because of the amount of land, you get it up to 1,289 units. Now, 750 is what the Duxbury mandate is from the state. So 750, and you'll see we probably need state recommendations to go slightly higher. But this is looking at, if you actually include the 3 sites, I mean, this is a number you're talking about. Existing units, which obviously can be included at Island Creek, are already there. So you're adding, more to Island Creek, but you're also taking advantage of what's already in the location. Next slide. And again, how to read these pages. The 15 units is the minimum. You'll see that, but then all of a sudden you'll recognize that the total comes up at a different number, and the first person would say if you take an average, you end up with 15. It's because part of the land, in some situations, if it's a wetland, components of it, you have to pull it out. So even though we were looking at the 15, you really end up, on this one, just as this example, at a 16.8, getting us over the 15 unit per acre requirement. Next slide. That's exactly what I just explained. And again, importantly, one of these areas has to be over 50%. That's a requirement. And Island Creek, as I mentioned, is at 58%. So this one works. So we're good. And at 128 acres, we're well over the 50-acre minimum. So just again, to kind of help look at this, what this is. Recommended 825, click next. I think we have a little description explaining this. Yeah. And so again, we're required at 750. The state basically says you should go over 10%. In case there's any situations, that could create any complications. And so it's a recommendation. We are looking at that. So 825 is really what we were, kind of looking at in the minimum area. And then go to the next, and now we can actually look at these scenarios. First one, again, this is at 1,289. This is, taking 3 sites, doing all of this beyond complying. And it really, again, and take one step back, we're looking too at the comprehensive plan, what the community has been asking for, and you do see in a lot of your previous work, a real need for diverse types of housing in the town. And so that's, again, what we were kind of looking at from the planner side. We wanted to give examples of what the density is because we recognize this is higher density for a community like Duxbury. So here are just some examples of what, 15 units per acre look like. The next slide is going into the 20 to 25, thinking of the mixed use on the first floor, so you can begin to see what and how this can feel. And so we just wanted to give the committee a good sense of that. This was all presented. Next slide. Now we're going to go, again, these are just looking at different ways of creating it. Mandatory mixed use. It's a funny term. Mandatory mixed use was created because the original state legislation did not allow for any type of mixed use, which became a real problem in denser communities across the state. So they couldn't change the existing legislation, but they added a new component, which is a mandatory mixed use, which means you can have actual commercial on the first floor, and the housing that goes above that does count towards your total. So sometimes you see this word like a bonus by doing a mandatory mixed use. It's not so much a bonus, it's just allowing the retail option for communities that would like to see that happen within their community on this site. So you can use some of the 50 acres for this mandatory mixed use.
Can I just ask a question? Is it mandatory or not?
It's a mandatory the mandatory mixed use is, if you're identifying it as mandatory, you'd be developing with a first floor use. Yes, so you're not creating residential on that first floor. So that is where the term comes from. And again, it's a choice by the communities. We get into the next couple scenarios here. We're still looking at these, but we're looking at how you might really begin to create these, walkable, small retail nodes as opportunities. If the town this is what the committee is supporting. And you'll see again how this evolves. Next slide. So, and there's just another version, slightly less dense at 992 because of the way we would be doing more of the mandatory mixed use along Tremont Street. So it takes away some of the housing, but you're still, with this one, you've got plenty of room. So keep going, because I think we want to get into, here what we're beginning to look at is just, if we're looking at these areas and how might we do it, we're not looking at the mandatory mixed use per se. If you were to take just the Island Creek and Summer Congress, it works, 855 units. If you go to the next slide, B2, Island Creek and or Bonges, we're coming in at the same note, that 827, we're coming in with roughly a 10% over the 750 unit count. So this works, is just a way to look at this, this version here. The fact is you're going from, about, I think 11 or something units per acre at Island Creek right now to 16 units. So, you can get more development. It may be difficult because it's already built, but we're in compliance. This version is in compliance. And in conversations with the property owners, Bonji's Turkeys, I think it's fair to state, they've been interested in developing, and as from previous planning. And so that's, just, something that we had heard. So next slide. We can still also do the mandatory mixed use, but notice the density levels begin to go up, and we, at Bonji's with a 25, as we noted, can be too high of a density to make all of this work. And so again, we just wanted to present alternatives for the committee to discuss. Next slide. And again, taking a mandatory mixed use again along Tremont Street. This one actually, we've got a still, with this area we can do, we get to 859. So just slightly more based on how the calculations are coming out. Next slide. And then here's, the conversation, and skip to the next slide. I'll get back. And the conversation became for the Bonji site, and I might just reach over. You've got the two, if you can picture on Kingstown Way, 53, the two small existing commercial underutilized, 0.35 acres each. The Bonji site that actually is commercial, right, already zoned that way. The decision by the committee was to really, Bonji's can exist there in its commercial, but we didn't feel it was necessary to do a complete mandatory mixed use on that part of the property. It's a larger property, so the recommendation was just to look at those two small ones. And you'll see it's a very kind of low density. The feeling was there's more of a rural aspect in this area, and that was a concern that was brought up, and a way to maybe do just two-story to really keep the density lower, in front, which would then allow for, stepped back development. This is a typo, which I just want to point out. This would, you're basically looking at three-story development. That 4 is incorrect. We were a little bit of a rush on Friday getting this material to you. But so that would be what you'd be looking at the Bonji site. Next slide. And then this one is, this was a conversation to expand the Island Creek location down to Oak Street, so to Bennett's for anyone who wants to go that way, as well as to include the full church property right up against 3. So now that we've expanded this area and the pink purple, that would be the mandatory mixed use. There was no need to even bother including the other parcel, which you saw in the beginning. So we actually did just remove this. It doesn't add benefit. The only potential change that we might want to discuss, and we included these as mandatory mixed use. You could draw a line right across properties and actually zone one property 2 different ways. That's allowable. And that might be, you'd create more of a just right along Tremont Street. But this also kind of creates an opportunity for possibly a little bit more flexible small town center area and could, really become something. So we're looking at that. This was, the final decision. And then when you go back 2 slides, and this is the notes, and basically what we're looking at in this scenario, because we added those other properties, you're actually bumping up your total amount to 916 units. This was the other one typo, that row is repeated again. The 60.8 acres, and then at the very bottom, the 64 acres. That's just, again, an example of because it's 3 acres of existing Island Creek, we can't develop, so it just comes down. But so basically what you're looking at is 916 units. You've got 64 acres of land that we'd be looking at. And this, the mandatory mixed use at Bonji's, it's really only 8 units of housing in that small area. So most of it would be multifamily by right, the 168. And then again, with the larger, mandatory mixed use at Island Creek, you can get, a much more of a balance there. And that is where we've ended up. It brings in the town to compliance, and this is what we wanted to present tonight. So again, these are the 3 final slides that I wanted everyone to see, to discuss.
All right. Members of the board, do any of you have any questions? I can't see the board, so I think we're going to probably have to pop that back up again. But
And I've got my numbers on my...
Zoom folks, does anybody have any questions?
That was quick.
I was given 10 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's all right. So I think I have a lot of questions, but I'm not even sure where to start. I mean, I need to, So let somebody else go first, I guess. But I have to move because my plugs, I'm about to lose my connection.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, happy to jump in here, and I've had the pleasure of working with the working group here. And maybe just to summarize the presentation, what we're looking at are 2 sites. So we started off, as Steve said, looking at a whole bunch of sites around town. The working group put their heads together and said, how can we make the most of the situation? This is being imposed upon us by the state, as we know. But as we look at the comprehensive plan, the housing production plan, is there a way to make lemonade, so to speak, out of lemons from the state? So we're looking at 2 sites. One is expanding the Island Creek property along Tremont Street for the purposes of the zoning, given that that is a mixed-use area already. I don't want to speak for Steve Gantz. I think he'll probably, as the chair, speak as well. But the thought there was to, since it's mixed use already, that would seem to be an appropriate place to allow some housing above. And in fact, we've seen some examples of that in that very area, Sportworks being the most recent, with housing above and retail below. We don't want to upset the character of the community, obviously, and this seemed to be an appropriate spot for that. Bonji's, of course, would be the big one. As Steve mentioned, there was thought of some commercial there, although I think that's probably still a discussion that we need to have, and it's an issue of density. So long story short, I think this is a great first step, discussion point. As Steve mentioned, we are under the gun, so to speak, in terms of time frame, and we're looking to put something together in good faith to meet the letter and the spirit of the law, be consistent with the comprehensive plan, and observe the town's character. Of course, that's being the biggest issue that we want to be cognizant about, given the large number of units being imposed upon us, 750 minimum. And I think the committee, the working group, has done a great job in bringing something to this select board and ultimately to town meeting in an effort to comply with the law, preserve our grant opportunities for other priorities in town, and hopefully allow for some diversity in housing stock, which is something we hear over and over, particularly with our seniors who don't have lots of options other than to move down to Pine Hills. So change is always hard, but I think we don't really have much of a choice here. I suppose we do, which is to vote it down. That comes with its own host of problems. But I think this is a great step. Certainly we need to talk about the details, but I think this is a well thought through plan. And not speaking too much to what Bonji's would be otherwise, my understanding is and Steve alluded to this, my understanding is there had been some thoughts of other development there, maybe in the form of a 40B or otherwise. So as much as we'd like to see a farm and have that bucolic vista, particularly in that part of town, I suspect that property is going to be developed one way or another at some point. And this would seem to be a way for the town to oversee or control, at least in some way, what the future of that property looks like.
All right, thank you, Brian. Go ahead, Cindy.
Can I actually, yeah, I'm sorry. So I did have a question about whether or not I saw on the map that Hall's Corner was a yellow area, and that's something that we're beginning to look at more seriously now. There's a Hall's Corner working group. And one of the issues there, I believe, is doing mixed use as well, with retail below and housing above. Is that anything that you considered, or?
We didn't go into too much detail. You already have an affordable housing area immediately adjacent, obviously. I don't think you'd want to, rezone that to multifamily by right, which could be anything. And then when you get into Hall's Corner, you can't, only a portion of your area can be the mandatory mixed use. And so you'd then be rezoning multifamily, in areas that maybe not be the intent either. So we did not go into the detail to get, and it'd be difficult to get that 15 unit minimum. I went a little quickly. Each area doesn't have to be 15 as long as all of the area, exceeds the 15 unit per acre. So one other thing that was discussed was, by the committee was, Island Creek could be a higher density. In that last table, it's about 17 units per acre versus the 13 unit per acre at Bonji's, a lower density to get to the over 15. Doing, those would be difficult in a location like Hull's Corner, because you'd be changing, again, it's all, commercial right now. So we went with these areas because they seem to make the most sense based on the conversations that we were having.
Go ahead, Amy.
Thank you.
Hopefully I can read all my little scribbles here. First, I do want to thank the committee for all the hard work. Yeah, I struggle with this. I know the town will struggle with this. I think the state is forgetting that we have home rule in the Commonwealth, and which I don't want to forget to ask about the legal part of this, but there's some historic just notations that I made going through this. So when Bonji's went to town meeting to rezone, that was a very thoughtful conversation by town meeting that ultimately did allow that, but there was many promises that development in any commercial way or high density way wasn't going to happen. Now I know we all, that I'm grown up enough to know that promises don't mean that much, but I know the town will struggle with seeing Bonji's developed at that intense density. So that's one historical note. There's another, when you speak to expanding Island Creek zoning to come down towards Bennett's, there's at least one, maybe more of those properties that have deed restrictions on them that would not that would prevent that from rezoning of those properties, I believe. So there are several that occurred quite some time ago.
Per the regulations, doesn't exclude the ability to put the overlay there. We're actually having an inquiry into the state because it's not clear.
Okay, so you know of those deed restrictions. And with the charts, I'm not sure, knowing that the first and foremost desire of the residents of the town of Duxbury is to preserve and protect the rural and historical character of the town. I'm not sure why we would put forth to the town one more unit than we're required to do. I guess I'm a little bit confused and don't understand the 10% over the number that I think you were referencing. So maybe you can get me clear on that.
Do you want to let him answer that one?
Sure.
It's simply it's a recommendation coming from the state based on the work they've been doing with other communities. It's not a requirement. It's a recommendation that they have put forth that town should be looking at that 10% buffer just to make sure there aren't any hiccups during the 90-day review process that would then force things to come back. So we just wanted to note that the 750 is the bottom number, to be clear.
Right. I guess I certainly wouldn't be desirous of one more unit above that, but I understand why that's what you're being told. And again, it brings me back to my first point, which is we are a home rule commonwealth, and which means that we as a town are allowed to adopt our own zoning bylaws and kind of create rules and zoning bylaws that will guide our future. And the state is stepping in and they're saying, this is what we have to do. And that's why we're all here. And this is why we're going through this. And town meeting will ultimately vote this up or down. part of what I was hoping that the group would look at is what you've been doing is huge. I mean, you come forth with some, stuff to look at here. But I was also hoping that you would, and the letter that you submitted spoke to what we might be giving up if we were not to comply. But the third part that I was hoping the group would look at is the other communities which are increasing in numbers that are saying no to this, that have voted this down. There must be a legal basis in which they're, going to be fighting this and opposing it at a state level. Have we looked at joining up with those other communities and what their approach is going to be since they've said no to this? I'm kind of looking at Brian.
Can I speak to that? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I hear you, Amy. I appreciate your frustration, and we share a lot of that frustration in many ways. With regard to other communities, I think the task of the task force was to pull together something that is palatable to the town, and not just palatable, but hopefully in many ways compatible with existing development and, as you point out, maintaining residential rural character of the town while complying with the law. We are home rule, but the Commonwealth has passed a statute, has imposed a statute that says, yeah, we know you're home rule, but you have to do this as well. So I don't. The short answer is no, the committee or the working group has not looked into that particular issue in terms of, do we even have to comply with this thing? We were tasked with, assuming we're going to comply, what is the best scenario that we can offer to town meeting that hopefully the voters of town meeting would be comfortable approving. Now, in parallel, there may be discussions going on to say, is this something that we have to comply with in the future, but or at all. But I don't think that's a question specifically to the working group.
All right,
if that answers the question.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I did think that was part of what this working group was looking at. So knowing that, I think we can, as a select board or through town manager, kind of be looking at some of the answers to those questions as well. So thank you.
All right. I have just a couple of questions. How does, so for tonight, I see a suggested motion here. What is the basis behind this? Is this a requirement? Is it binding? And is it something that can change? This motion to approve proposed locations. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that.
I might pass that one to Paul.
Sure.
So, Paul's in here, we're more than mine.
Thank you. Good evening. So we're here tonight with the members of the working group, planning board, and the select board to try to pass the first milestone in the project, which is to identify the locations that Steve had just gone over for the overlay districts. A vote tonight, it would not be, I think, binding under the law, but what it would do would be to let us put that behind us, to focus on those districts and focus on the regulations within those districts, and to focus on the draft zoning bylaw amendment. So it was my hope that we'd be able to have a discussion of those sites tonight and ask the planning board and the select board to take a vote, and then we can move on to the next thing, which is the bylaw, which we did receive a draft version of today, and we're in the process of reviewing it.
Okay. How do we, so this law, what it creates is zoning for these areas. It doesn't require, we're not building anything, and just for the public's perception, I know this, but when we're talking about these ideas like mixed dwellings and where someone could come in and do something different, is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that question. And this is one of the most important things for the public to understand, that with zoning, there's that term grandfathering, which means whatever is there on the ground today can stay on the ground today and does not need to change as a result of town meeting taking action to approve the bylaw or the zoning map change for the MBTA zoning. The MBTA zoning also doesn't require that a property owner develop multifamily housing. And the approach that the working group is taking is to recommend the creation of overlay districts so that the zoning that's currently in place in today in those areas, that zoning stays the way it is. But these regulations would be superimposed over the allowable uses in those districts, and that would provide just another option for the property owner should they choose to develop. Now, as you saw at Island Creek, it's pretty densely developed there right now, and I don't really think you could shoehorn in any additional development. The approach that many communities have taken is to identify those areas that have already been developed with multifamily housing and to say, yeah, that's the site where we want to allow for 15 units per acre. It doesn't mean that Island Creek is going to be redeveloped this year, next year. I don't think that area is going to be redeveloped for many years. And so communities are able to take credit for these areas that already have multifamily development. And this has been one of the things that one of the approaches communities have taken. What we're recommending here in Duxbury is kind of a split approach, where we don't anticipate Island Creek is going to be redeveloped anytime soon. So probably off into the future in 5, 10, 20-year time horizon. However, the Bondi site had been already identified through a housing study that was done back in 2018. It was mentioned in the housing plan production plan, and it was identified as a vacant developable site as part of Envision Duxbury. And so I've had a meeting with the property owners, and they disclosed to me that they had actually been planning to develop their backland for the last couple of years. The pandemic happened, the cost of construction materials went up dramatically. They stepped back and put it on hold. They are in the planning stages to develop their property at some time in the near future. And we thought that it made sense, if they were planning to develop that property, to try to capture and get credit for that land. I heard it said that, the townspeople aren't going to want to see that. Well, fortunately, the land that we've identified is behind and over to the left, so that you probably aren't going to be able to see much of anything back there. And that was one of the considerations that was given to identifying that particular site. I'm going to step back for a minute, if I could, Mr. Chairman. Or
Yeah,
sit down and
No, I think you touched on the other question for people that are here, and maybe this for the first time, is, so the obvious points here is, there's a company, I think, out of Braintree that owns Island Creek, and Bonji's is owned privately. How are we allowed to change the game essentially on their properties? These are privately owned properties. How is that possible?
So as many of you know, the zoning map and the zoning bylaw go together. And they set forth the rules for how real estate can be developed. And the map shows what areas are in specific zoning district, because there are different rules for what can be developed in different parts of the town. And so through our zoning, like every other community in the Commonwealth, the zoning bylaw says how much you can build in terms of a density. It says how tall buildings can be, what the setbacks should be, and so forth. Private property owners do have the right to develop their property in accordance with the zoning requirements. And as you know, there is another card that the property owners can play if they decide that the zoning does not provide for them to get a return on their real estate investment. And so they throw down the comprehensive permit card, a 40B. And in those scenarios, they are allowed to build at densities greater than what is normally allowed in the zoning bylaw. And unfortunately, the town has seen a number of those in recent years.
Thank you, that's all. I will let you step back. I see, and I didn't want, I saw a hand go up in the audience. Is that what you would like to speak about?
Yeah, if I may, I'd like to answer Amy's question about the deed restriction, because I did look into that. I also talked to Pat Loring about it.
And what's your name and?
Oh, sorry, Allison Shane. Member of the MBTA Communities Working Group.
Right.
I looked into the deed restrictions along Tremont. They were issued in 2000 by a private resident, and I do think they expire. I couldn't find them in the Plymouth County Registry of Deeds. Pat Loring thinks they may have expired as well, because it's been over 20 years. So I did bring it to their attention the last meeting as well, but I just want to answer that. I do agree with the 750 units. My understanding is a larger footprint would decrease the density of some of the building options, and we talked about different height options to make it look, sprawling. So that's why it's a larger footprint, and I think they're really just the consultants are trying to show us the max, for the state. But I do agree, like 750 should be our goal. That's just what I wanted to add.
Thank you.
And there are two other groups here that have open meetings. I've been stepping on your toes a little bit here. Did anybody from your individual groups want to give a statement or say anything? And I see Scott's already up, so I'll let him go first.
I'll let you go first. We'll have a little flavor from the planning board for a
There we
change.
go. There we go. Yeah. So, well, we don't have a quorum right now.
Sure.
Had one earlier, don't have it now. But anyway, a lot of I can give you some of the background, how we started with all this before the working group got going. Because obviously, from the planning board standpoint, we've been working on this for a little bit longer time and had identified as many locations as we could just in general around town to start off with, and started paring ourselves down. Our goal initially was just to meet the minimum of what would get us the requirements by how they set it out with the least impact to how much could be done where, i.e., we're all landing on Island Creek as obviously being one of the locations here. It's already more or less developed. Giving it a higher density doesn't mean you're going to tear down all the buildings in there and do anything different than what's already there. And that seemed to be what a lot of the communities, as Paul mentioned, are already doing. Subsequent to that, we specifically kind of had knocked out Bonji's as one of the locations. And we're leaning more towards Summer Congress, and then we had another one, I think, out on Temple or whatever. But in all the detail work that they've done here now, and you get the scenarios, we just break through this and get to the scenarios. The opinion we had at the planning board level when we first started all this with Mr. Ryan and how we had developed it forward was get to the 750, utilize Island Creek, and find one or two other nodes that get us to all the rest of what we need that would be the least impactful or likely to have much happen with it, so that we can sell it to town meeting to do it. Most of the people that have shown up at any of our meetings where we've discussed any of this are dead set against it, want to vote it down, don't let the state do this to us. And we need to convince them that that's not going to be the answer, because we would lose the money at the same time. But if we can come up with the least impactful generally to the general public about what's going on here. So I'm just looking at scenarios. I'm looking at scenario B1 for me, which is Island Creek and Summer Congress. That's it. Now you say, okay, well, Bonji's wants to develop, Bonji's wants to do something, Bonji's wants to do something. Well, Bonji's doing a 40B is going to get nowhere near as many units as you're going to get doing this in there. I mean, Bonji's with a 40B isn't going to get 15 units an acre, I don't think. I don't think they're going to be able to fit that much in there, or 15 or 16, or what some of the different numbers come up to. So we've always known all along eventually Bonji's is going to do something. There was a lot of discussion where it's commercial, have some mixed, scenario in there and everything else. And eventually, obviously, they're talking about it. It is something that's going to happen. But if we end up with a Bonji's, situation with 308 units in there versus, there's no way in a 40B you're going to get 308 units on that property. Versus the scenario with the Summer Congress kept coming up for us as one other big location. It meets the goals. A lot of that property ownership right now is kind of a big farm scenario, but the farm's also in Pembroke. So it's, it straddles two towns as well. It seems like, could it be developed? Yes, anything could be developed. Anybody could do this, but that to us and to me feels like the least impactful areas we can do this would be potentially the easier sell for us to town meeting in getting this done. And that's kind of where we were kind of landing. And then in the meantime, the working group has taken it from there. And I really appreciate everything they've done with the calculations. We were kind of fighting ourselves trying to figure out calculations and everything before. And then with Chris leaving, obviously we got set back a little bit. So that's just kind of where we were. And what I see from now has been put together where I would lean. I feel like, and you guys, select board, correct me, but we took the approach, let's make this the least impactful, hit the number that they say they want to do, and then we'll see if town meeting wants us to fight this with the state, or if they go forward because they understand this is, the hitting the minimum, we're already got a big chunk of this is already developed, we're not going to see much change, and move forward is the right way to do it. I think, obviously scenario A1 in here, which is 4 times this number, is not really what I don't think town meeting's going to go for it. So if we pick all the sites and we maximize them all out, but that's kind of just where we were. So to Paul's point, to move forward with everything, it would be good if we could kind of pick 1 or 2 of the scenarios for them to start working on moving that forward. But that's just our 2 cents.
Mr. Thorne. Phil Thorne, Trout Farm Road, also a member of the MBTA working group. And Scott said a great deal of what I wanted to mention, but I will just reiterate that, or I'll start off to say that a little bit of history. I came at this initially with a I want a head on a pike attitude, that how dare the state come to us, tell us that this is how it's going to be. And I thought so much as we should drag our former representative, often referred to as Mr. Wonderful by a lot of people in town, in here on a rope and get him to answer some questions about why he voted for this. I've backed off from that a bit. I do still feel that the state has no business telling us what to do when it comes to specific zoning regulation. I do agree with Scott that I think the way that we convince our fellow citizens at town meeting that we can't do nothing, that there's too much at stake. I've come around to, at least unless someone can convince me otherwise, I'm at this point in agreement that we can't do an awful lot to fight them in the short time that we have. Given more time, perhaps we could. But there are a lot of people in town who are going to show up at town meeting, and if we go to 751 units, they're going to want an explanation for 750. But if we go to 751, we'd better be prepared for some real tough questions. So in agreement with Scott that we should try to stick as close to that 750 as possible. I do recognize that a great deal of work from other members of this working group have gone in, and from Paul to come up with some, and from Mr. Carney, of course, to come up with a number of different solutions. But I personally, in reading tea leaves and in speaking to my fellow residents, I believe what Ms. McNabb stated earlier, that we need to try to stick as close to that 750 unit number as possible. And I think that, as Scott mentioned, the Island Creek and the Summer Street locations get us above and beyond that, and it appears even above and beyond the 10% additional that Mr. Carney recommends, or that the state is recommending. And Mr. Carney is voicing their opinion that we should have an additional 10% in the bank, because I believe that they look at the number of housing units in the town on the date that this all happens. So if we build 10 more units between now and the date that this is enacted, we wouldn't want to be caught with our pants down for 1 to 2 units of rental possibility, or multi-unit possibility, I should say, not rental, because it's not exclusively rental. So I think that's it. That's my 2 cents.
Mr. Gant? Brian, do you have a question generally or for one of those speakers? I saw your hand go up.
I just wanted to pick up on something that Scott mentioned, and Steve, I don't think had a chance to touch upon this in his presentation. Steve, could you share with the group, and I think it's important for the discussion, about the affordability component that we can impose on this? Because the MBTA community zoning by itself is not affordable housing, but there is a provision, or there are some controls we can put on at the local level. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Were you looking for Steve G or Steve K?
Steve K.
Either Steve could have answered that question, but yes, again, this is about multifamily by right, but there is a provision to include affordable housing, again, that becomes part of that 750 and to make that a mandatory piece. The committee was in agreement that we should have a 10% affordable housing requirement within this development as a means to essentially keep Duxbury from, if you're increasing, housing, you're then decreasing your number of affordable housing. So by having a 10% affordable housing component in this, you're not making a net negative when you're building market rate. So.
Right, so that just keeps up with the status quo.
And that would just keep
why
up with
wouldn't
the-
you have more of a percentage so that it would count towards the overall quota for the town?
I wish I had my technician who crunched all these numbers. You can't go, I don't remember, I got to get the number of how high you can go. The committee agreed 10%. You can go higher on the affordable. We had looked at 10%. You can't, there is a maximum, whether it's 20% or again.
So the state's maximizing how much
They want to
affordable
make sure that
housing
this
in
is,
here?
that there's, yes. If I can get the answer by the time this discussion ends.
You gotta be kidding me.
I'm
It
gonna
is the
text
most
somebody right now.
hypocritical, punitive, ridiculous thing.
Paul just reminded me too, if you go beyond 10%, you have to do a fiscal impact analysis, which is going to take time, and it's been difficult for other communities doing that. So there is a mechanism. It would take more time. Time is an enemy for us right now.
So with the zoning change, and I'm sorry, I'll stop talking. With this zoning change, you would have to, at the onset, declare how much of an affordable component, that affordable component couldn't be determined after the fact so if you're rezoning for, this amount of acreage that can handle this amount of capacity, it's required at the adoption of the zoning that you designate the amount of affordable housing. That seems to me that it could be something that takes place after the zoning change.
No, I mean, it all comes together in the, and essentially what we're working hard to do right now is, again, if we can identify the locations, we're well in our way and we can get it done very quickly, but we are then tasked to write the zoning language to do this. And so, again, our job is to get the end deliverable to the town. And so we're going based on the committee's decisions. So.
Mr. Gibb.
Yeah, to Amy's point, when and if the area is going to be developed, could the developer at that point determine the amount of zoning, or is it? I mean, I agree with her. It seems like that would be the time to.
The amount of affordable, yeah.
Affordable, is that what I?
Mr. Gant, since you have the microphone, do you know the answer to that?
I do not, actually.
Okay, does anybody know the answer to that tonight? All right, thank
It's
you.
all right, we can think about that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So zoning sets forth the rules for rules and regulations for the development of the real estate. And if the town is going to want to see 10% of the units developed as affordable, complying with state's regulations for affordable, it needs to publish those regulations within the zoning bylaw so everyone understands what the rules are. Having rules, that's the answer. You can't impose regulations at the time someone goes to develop their land. They need to know what those regulations are before they prepare a development proposal.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Steve Gant, West Street, and I'm the chair of the working group. I just wanted to make sure, and I wanted to kind of clarify some of the numbers that we've been talking about with respect to the number of new units that would be coming on as a result of these overlay districts that we're proposing. So we've talked about the 750 minimum capacity, the 825 providing a 10% buffer. It's important to realize that one of the things that we're doing here in pretty much all of these scenarios that we're looking at, we're including the Island Creek property among all of the scenarios that we're looking at. There are 358 existing units there at that property. So by virtue of the fact that we're including Island Creek as part of all of these scenarios that we're looking at, each of the scenarios that Stantec has put together shows you the capacity. So for example, in scenario A2, you've got 1,237 capacity units, and then you've got the 358. What you have to do in terms of figuring out what the net new units would be that would be developed, you have to subtract that 358 from the capacity number that you see in each of the scenarios. So that has implications for what we're looking at here and what we, how we would be communicating this. And this will be tricky to communicate to folks who aren't familiar with it. It took me a while, but I think I've got to, Steve, jump in if I go astray. So understanding that, and then this goes back to what Scott was talking about earlier, looking at scenario B1 and scenario B2. The reality is with scenario B1, that has a capacity of 855, but when you subtract off the 358, that gives you a net capacity for new units of 497. So that would be the maximum number of new units that would be able to be developed in that scenario. When you look at B2, the B2 capacity is 827 units. So you subtract the 358 off of that, that gives you the net 467 new units that could be developed in that scenario. And of all the scenarios that we've looked at, scenario B2 is the one that results in the least number of new units that could be developed through this new zoning. So I think it's critically important to remember that that's the case. It is tricky. It's hard to understand. I get that, but that's the reality that we need to express.
If you take out the unlikeliness of tearing down Island Creek and redeveloping the whole thing, there's another 127 that can subtract from each of those numbers.
Mike Hurley, he just reminded me, yes, given the fact that we're including Island Creek, there's another 127 units that roughly that we'd be able to deduct from the net new units that we'd be able to add on here as well. So that's a further deduction to the new capacity that could come on.
So net new units, both of these scenarios, somewhere around 300.
497.
That's a fair. It'd be over 300, but that's a fair estimate. Yes, round numbers.
Because of the 100 and so, 127 you said in Island Creek. Okay.
That's correct.
All right. Does anybody else wish to be heard? Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ted Carpenter on Summer Street, and I am in the Bonges neighborhood. And I want to just take a step back for a moment, because we have obviously, deep concerns about the propriety of this and the coercive techniques of the state, and that's generated a tremendous amount of negativity around this. And it's caused us to focus very much on this perceived disruption to our way of life. So I just want to step back and point out that in the census figures between 2010 and 2020, the town added about 1,000 people, 15,000 to 16,000, rough figures. And in the last 5 years, we've added another 600 or 700 residents to the town, by estimate. These are, we don't have census figures until 2030. So I want to make sure we all understand that this is zoning by right, which, first of all, conveys additional opportunity to property owners to develop their property. So it's positive for the people who are privileged to be a part of the overlay district, because it gives them greater opportunity to take advantage of their property. I also want to point out that we have many studies in planning that have indicated that there is a crying need for housing, and affordable housing in particular, but also just a more variety of housing. It's called middle housing, not single-family homes on lots, acre lots. So there is a need in town for this. and we have an opportunity to meet that need. So it's another way to look at this more positively, to meet the needs of the town. There's a couple of other things about it where if you look at the demographics, the 1,000 or 1,500 people who've been added to town probably are in existing homes, but many of the new structures are 40B developments. And as we all know, the 40B rules are going to continue to be in place until we reach a 10% affordable housing quota. Now, if any developed units here are rental units, they will count towards the subsidized housing inventory. So there is potential, if we can add a few hundred units, and they are, at least some of them rental, that the 40B statute, sword of Damocles, would be removed from over our head. So there is another potential benefit to the town. So demographically, if you look at the actual growth in population, we're really looking at that as a choice. The 40B process is an external approval by the state of a sketch of a design plan. We have very little control over that, whereas we're writing these bylaws. Now, it's not the type of scale that we're familiar with, although we do have areas of town which are already high density, Island Creek being one of them. So it isn't something that is terribly, out of the norm for us. It will substantially change the neighborhood in which it is placed, but it will not fundamentally alter the fabric of the town, and that's what we're seeing with 40B. We're seeing houses jammed into marginal lots. Finally, as regards to site selection, I just want to mention that there were, we looked at several things in terms of how to prioritize the sites, and we understand the rationale that was used by Chris Ryan in terms of trying to identify a site that was unlikely to be developed. Now, you have to take into account the fact that the housing production in the state has been well below the norm for decades, and this is why we have this problem. There is a huge backlog of need for housing. We also have new people coming into the state all the time. So while we might want to just hold the line and say no more new housing in Duxbury, it really simply isn't realistic. It is going to happen. The state is going to be passing very large bond bills to encourage the production of this type of housing. So regardless of what parcel we choose, I believe that it will be developed. Now, the purpose of the bylaw is transit-oriented development. It was actually passed as a half a mile within a T station. That's what's in the legislation. The rulemaking expanded that and added adjacent communities, and I believe there's a thread to pull on there, Amy, in terms of objecting to this. And that's not my job here. So the transit-oriented nature of the development means that the sites we select should be located near transit, which is the Kingston T station. And this is why, one of the reasons why, as the committee looked at this, we biased our selections towards the areas on the 53 corridor into the southern western part of town. If you put it up in the northwest corner of town, there is no transit. You're guaranteeing additional car traffic all over the place with that site selection. And then finally, the thing that really clinched it for me, and the Select Board has seen this, there was a study done with Wesson and Sampson engineers about water quality regarding the PFAS mitigation. And in that study, they rendered for us a visualization of the distribution of where the density of the housing and the people are in Duxbury today. And they're all in the southern part of town. The center of town, the western part of town is relatively underutilized, and that is the recharge area for our aquifer. And the water flows generally underground west to east. So if we place a high-density housing development in the northwest quadrant of town, we're adding almost certainly contaminants that are going to spread through the entire aquifer. Whereas if we place it in the southern extreme of the town, we're already processing that water. We're already pumping there. We're going to have to clean it there. So we're preserving water quality by selecting the southern site. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Water was on my list.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask two more questions? And I did want to speak to the,
Bree, there's a person, yes, I do, in the interest of some time here, if questions are a little, or comments are a little redundant, I'd like you to, folks to speed it up a little bit here. But I don't know who Bree is. Could you
Hi. I don't have an option to turn on my camera. Can you hear me?
Sure. What's your name and what street?
My name is Breeling. I'm on Union Street. I'm also the chair of the Housing Authority, and I have a seat in the
Okay.
Community Preservation Committee. And I just wanted to remind everyone that if we were at the 10% now, you would have to think about this MBTA, option, and that we can look at things like vouchers instead of affordable housing, and that would increase the housing as well.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. McNabb, you had two more questions.
Two quick, well, hopefully it's quicker, and if you don't know the answer now, that's fine. But I think these questions will be important to be answered before town meeting or before you move too much further. So if there was to be rental units within this zoning district, and because you would want to do that, because you could get more than the 10% affordable with the rentals, so I would think that that would be a smart move to try to increase the affordable, even if it's just the affordable amount that we can count, even if they're not affordable, because if they're rentals, they don't actually have to be affordable to be counted.
Right.
The whole thing is the craziest thing. But do we have to spell that out in the zoning at the get-go? Does the inclusion of rental units need to be in that zoning change right off the bat? And the second question I have is if there's been any kind of a study, we know from our many meetings on the budget with both the police and fire, that the biggest drain on the town's services for the town are the high density. Their trips to Island Creek, all high density areas. That is what is causing us to spend more and more and more on our police and fire every year. So knowing that, do we have, I think there needs to be, the town needs to know that, we're giving, if we don't vote this through, we're giving up our grants and money from the state in this amount, but it's going to cost, based on what, the figures are at Island Creek or whatever, an additional X amount to the town. I mean, there needs to be some kind of information so the town can make a real educated decision on how they want.
And and tonight we're talking about two proposed locations, and these are great ideas, so I kind of want to keep it tight to this. But on Amy's point too, and I suppose we will hear at maybe a future date, and I'm looking at Paul too, about whether there has to be impact studies, traffic, schools, fire safety, things like that, or if there doesn't. But I think what Ms. McNabb's asking for is that if it's going to go to town meeting, the public's going to want to hear about the impact of this in the future. So.
Mr. Chairman, I could respond to a couple of your questions.
Core, sure. Core's not there.
So the state regulations are silent as to ownership or rental units. So it could be either, the bylaw has to allow for either ownership or rental units. And so that is up to the property owner and whoever would be developing it. The regulations don't require any kind of fiscal impact analysis. As Steve mentioned, we're short on time, and so we haven't been able to get into that. I think that that's a conversation that maybe we could have with the police department and verify some of those numbers. As people dwell closer together, there's more people, and so there's usually a greater occurrence of people doing mischief, breaking the laws. And so we understand that this happens in areas that have more people living together. So that's something that you can talk to public safety about, what those impacts are. I earlier heard some questions about, well, what are the repercussions, what state grants are at stake here? And if you'd like, I could get into that. If you don't want me to, I don't have to.
We got it in a memo, so I'm fine with that, but I just am trying to set the stage. These will be the questions. There's a lot of smart people in this town that are gonna be asking a lot of smart questions, so.
All right. Well, we've been at this for almost an hour, and I appreciate all the comments. Is the pleasure of the board to at least give some consensus here about the Island Creek and have them look at Bonji's or Congress Street in summer, or do you want to pick us, or how would you like to do this? Because I did hear that from somebody that's saying that, who said that we can just say, look at both of those, Congress Street and Bonji's? Did someone say that? No, or do we have to pick one here? Because we got planning's.
It's right, the zoning regulation.
Yeah, the zoning regulation is going to identify the locations that you are choosing. So you would, and again, just to one thing to make perfectly clear from the B1 scenario, which was Congress and Island Creek, or even Island Creek and just Bonji's, and both of those earlier versions, it did not include the expanded area along Tremont Street.
Right.
And so just, we went with an expanded Island Creek. That's the final version you saw today. It's really what needs to happen is sites need to be identified. The regulations are written, which is what, we'd be tasked to do. They come to the town for review, and, we work through those. And then, what the state, again, highly recommending is a 90-day review, which we're already kind of past that. So, it's just those are the things that have been pushing us to try to get some decisions made. We can have a very quick turnaround on the regulations, but we need to know the site that we're regulating.
Mr. Chair, if I might just throw out a suggestion there. I think Island Creek, the location of Island Creek is a no-brainer.
Sure.
So that, I think we can all agree easily that should be utilized. Bonji's, knowing that there is development in the wind, understanding that people in that area will have concerns, and, we understand that that's going to happen wherever we move forward with this, and again, town meeting voters make the ultimate decision here. So it seems to me that the two areas that make the most sense for the working group to continue looking at are those two. But I again, you guys might have other ideas.
All right, Cindy, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with Amy, and I think I'm willing to go with the recommendation of the working group. They have spent some time studying it and looking at it, and Bonji's makes more sense to me for the reasons that Amy was stating. So, yeah.
Brian?
I think Cindy just said it best, that the working group has put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this. And we're very sensitive to your comments about the wisdom of us needing to comply with this in the first place. But as I mentioned at the outset, and I'll offer my the credit to Carl who coined the phrase of making lemons out of lemonade here and trying to achieve some of our other planning and housing goals that were set forth years ago in other documents, and trying to use this as an opportunity. And Tag, I think, was very eloquent in his remarks as well, as to seeing this as a positive. And to that end, I think the two sites that we've talked about make the most sense in terms of having the least overall disruption to the character of the community.
I agree with everyone, and I would only just offer my thoughts that I agree with a lot of folks here that if we can keep it closer to 750, I think that makes sense. And I would also suggest that if there is dissension, or if you're going down this road and something changes with Bonji's, or you don't like how something looks, come back to us. We can work through this. So I don't, and I know Scott wants to say something too. let's do this right, if we, and give our community as much information as we can. Go ahead, Scott, before we take a vote.
Just real quick. On the Island Creek, are you considering Island Creek proper as it is now, or the expanded Island Creek? Which do you want them to look at?
Island Creek proper.
Because as it is now, we can get there, right, without expanding it down the rest of the business district?
What was it was about 45 minutes ago. What was the point of expanding it?
The decision came in the housing committee meeting where you already have an area, why not bring this in and it's already a mixed use area. And, and again, mixed use for many, residents is a positive to have that. And so it was a decision by the housing committee.
Helps you lower density too.
And it's slightly lower density by expanding the area, right? So more acreage, less density, but we always have to get to the 15 plus unit per acre minimum, which is where we are at.
Okay.
Bungees can be a lower density.
Yeah.
But we don't need to include those. I do remember very vividly the last proposal to rezone those properties. It was very contentious in town. Thus, the actual, an individual in town bought deed restrictions on one or two of those properties to take those out of the equation. So I think for the path of least resistance here, if we don't have to include those properties, let's not, at this point, would be my recommendation, but I'm only one.
And you're going to raise the density on bungees.
You raise the density in Island Creek proper.
Which is it? Sorry, I'm lost here.
I don't have the specific calculation right in front of me, but the fact of the matter is, by expanding the area of Island Creek, you just have more acres to divide out, so we can get, a lower per acre density with more land. It allows us to have bungees, which we did come in at a lower density, which was the 13 units per acre, which, as long as the whole area hits 15 or 15.1 acres, that just allowed a different configuration of bungees to keep it as minimal as we could based on the requirements. That was simply that.
Save you a half story.
Yeah. And but those sites we included, except for those three houses, go ahead.
My recommendation is go with the expanded Island Creek, because it's going to help you out on the bungee side. I think that's what I'm hearing you guys say. They're all nodding.
That's very attractive.
For a good reason. Island Creek is there. We don't know what Bonji's is going to look like yet. It's coming. We don't know what it's going to look like yet. It's going to give you a finer sense of control as to what it will look like.
Yeah, but and I agree, I hear what you're saying. But if I just want everybody to think about it, because you've got the way you enter into Duxbury for many people. Island Creek is kind of tucked back there, and you come into a very residential area. It's the beginning of Tinkertown if you're going to go left. Changing that whole area there will be a big change in town if that were to be built out to these densities. So that's a big change.
I agree. It could be. But a lot of other things will change too, because you're going to have the two roundabouts. It's going to have a whole different feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I would, when we're making these decisions, we're not saying these areas are going to definitely be built upon.
Great point.
And so I would expand our opportunity and do the expanded Island Creek as well. As something to look at, not,
I will take a motion at this point. This isn't binding, and I think if you, I think I also saw some nods about, if we go down a road we don't like, we can step it back a little bit. So if this isn't working for the groups, come back to us, please.
So I will move that the select board ask the committee to move forward with the proposed locations located at Bonji's and the expanded Island Creek
Thank you.
as presented.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? A roll call vote, please.
Amy, I.
Cindy, I.
Brian, aye.
Michael, I. Thank you all very much for all your hard work on this. This is a lot of work. It is much appreciated. Thank you. Do the other two committees want to close their meetings before we close ours?
Uh, Thank you. Do I have a second? Roll call vote to close the working group open meeting. Allison?
Hi, Phil.
Carl?
Carl, aye.
You're good?
You're good.
And Brian?
Carl, aye.
Yep, thank you, Carl. Brian? Oh,
Brian, aye.
representing
Double
the
duty
Select
tonight.
Board. And Steve Gant, aye.
All right, thank you very much. Your meeting's closed. Thank you, Planning Board, for being here. And
I move,
and may I have a motion to adjourn our Select Board meeting?
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor, roll
Aye.
call.
Oh,
Cindy, I.
Amy,
Brian.
I.
Michael,
Brian,
aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.